This recipe is calabacitas, which is just little squashes, and it's low carb and healthy. The ingredients for this recipe include squash, tomato, onion, garlic, corn, cilantro, serrano peppers, garlic powder, onion powder, black and white pepper, and vegan chicken seasoning. You can use regular salt or whatever um, flavoring you have. I use this one because I was out of salt and because it's a lot less ingredients than using chicken bouillon like Knorr's. The cookware that was used is a cutting board, a knife, a pan, um, also a spoon for mixing your veggies, and the lid on the pan. I didn't specify those if you go back, but it is definitely something that you will need, and I kind of just overlooked it as I assumed the lid does match the pan, but you will need it in order to kind of steam the veggies a little, but you're cooking them through. So first, here we have all the veggies that I use, minus the corn. I forgot to include it. The garlic, you mince it, as well as the serrano pepper. You mince it to your liking, as tiny or as large as you want it. You could also exclude that from your recipe. Here are some of the squash that I use. You can use all one type of squash. You can mix it as I did. You're just trying to cut it into circles, then cut it long ways, and then cube it. The intention is to have it cubed for your recipe, and that's kind of the only real direction for that. The next part is the tomato. Dice it. Um, it doesn't have to be so perfect just because with the cooking it does reduce and it just becomes so tiny that if it's not diced correctly, you won't even be able to tell. I did the cilantro next. You just chop it up to however tiny you think is good enough for you. Also, the onion, dice it because you're going to be using it as a base in order to create the flavor before you add everything else. The pan, you will use it with medium heat. You add about a tablespoon of oil into the pan. After adding the tablespoon of oil into the pan, you can start adding the base, which is the garlic, onion, and serrano peppers. You're going to add your seasonings. The seasonings that I showed in this image are what you would add. You would wait until it is clear before you add the squash. And by clear, I mean the onion. Um, Once the onion looks a little transparent, you could add the squash, add your corn, um, add your tomato, your cilantro, and you can cover it up, stirring about every 8 minutes. This will cook for about 15 minutes and then it should be ready. As you're waiting for your your squash to be ready, you're going to dice up some cheese. I use Merida cheese, which this cheese in particular you cannot find in the United States. I actually brought it from Mexico, but you could use any like Mexican cheese or even American cheese or any type of cheese you want to add or exclude the cheese if you do not want to include it. As you can see, here's the final product. You put some cheese on top. You can throw it in the microwave to melt the cheese or just leave it as is. Verdict, super easy recipe and it's very delicious. And here's an alternative, adding an egg. This is a typical way that I would eat it. I didn't include the egg just because it's a lot of extra calories and it's supposed to be kind of healthy, but that is an alternative if you want that extra protein to add an egg on top. I ate it like that for dinner, but I wasn't necessarily going to eat it like that for my lunch. It was just to give you an idea of something else you can do.